Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. We are here and we are many. We are legion. There's nothing that's from a film, isn't it? Something like that. Good day, everybody. Good evening, good morning to Bruce. Let's jump in with Colin. Colin, to start with, you have bought out your annual. I forgot. You better lead me by the hand as to what exactly to call your latest report.
Well, it's an industry benchmark report. We call it the 2018 Drone Market Sector Report. And yes, we just released it today, and you can see that on SUAS News. Thank you for putting that up.
And did you have to rewrite it very, very quickly this last week?
Well, no, it came in pretty timely. Actually, no, I didn't. It was very timely, given the Airware situation. Because one of the real significant insights into the research was just how many people are, how many fleets are actually flying. And so it kind of goes in the face of what we think was, and we've been talking about this for a long time, that the industry was overhyped. And what we found out in this particular research was that commercial drone fleet sizes, they're a lot smaller than what people think. If you believe the hyperbole, there's hundreds of thousands of drones flying in the airspace at the same time. But in our survey, it was very clear that the average commercial user, and that's both the service provider and the business users, those who use it for their business, they have just 2 drones, and they're only flying maybe 2 projects a month. And most of those projects consume less than 3 flight hours.
That's surely somebody will line you up against a wall and shoot you if you put numbers out like that. There's a great deal of the industry.
One.
Yeah, but so many businesses are standing up on the back of millions of users and hundreds of millions of hours. Surely you're going to get some flack for trying with a little bit of reality, aren't you?
Yeah, sure. We just report what people tell us. So here's how this works. We do a survey each year, and it's a benchmark survey of. Last year we had 2,600 respondents. This year we have 2,500 respondents. It's over 60 industries worldwide. We look at drone aircraft and payloads purchased. We look at service providers that offer drone-based imaging or sensing services for outside hire. We look at businesses and enterprises. We look at public agencies who have drone programs, and they either do the work themselves or they contract out for it. And then we look at software, apps, and online services for drone operations and imaging. Now, there are a lot of people, and in the survey, from the survey we could tell that the industry is growing. It's not that we're trying to be negative and downplay the industry in any way. The survey tells us very clearly that service providers are growing, but there's still a lot of new entrants. It's just that when you look it up and you look at the percentages, you don't see the huge volumes that you would think would be there. It's when they tell us, how many projects did you do? Well, I did 3 projects per month, right? Okay, well, how many hours were you in the air? 3 hours. So that says that, you can do the quick math. If there's 100,000 Part 107 pilots in the U.S., that tells you that there's not a lot of drones flying in the airspace at the same time.
That's a shock, horror, revelation, really, isn't it? It's what to do with that. So, were there any surprises this year for you then?
Well, that was one of the first surprises. Was that really it didn't surprise me, but it just gave me the data that I knew. I think one of the surprises that I had was that the price of aircraft, that is the average price that people are paying for aircraft, is actually going up. So the commercial market's slowly shifting to more expensive drone aircraft. For example, this year, 32% of all purchases were for aircraft costing more than $2,000. Now the sweet spot is that $1,000 to $2,000 range. That's where 45% of all purchases are.
That's the Phantom. That's the Phantom.
Year, Phantom. Yeah, Phantom. Last year was 45%. This year is 39%. So it's actually dropped, and that's because the market has shifted forward into more expensive hardware.
Well, it's just showing that you that's what you actually need to get the job done. Perhaps it's slowly growing up, isn't it? Which is inevitable, I suppose. At the end of the day, all of these things are inevitable.
The problem of having more specialized sensors. The people that are operating commercially have more specialized sensors, have to use more expensive sensors, so they go with the bigger drones that try to at least have some leeway in terms of loadability. And that takes, for instance, the Inspires and the Phantoms out of the picture.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a changing world. And so what do you make? Well, let's throw it open to the floor as well. What do we make of the demise of Airware this last week? The spending of $118 million.
They could have crowdfunded it. Eh? Sounds like a crowdfunding project. The Lily drone. It's just another thing like that. It's a victim of hype.
Isn't it the VCs wanting the money too fast? Because their premise was a sound premise, but not enough time to fulfill the expectations.
Yeah, to get the money back from the VCs, perhaps. Yeah, they were good people. One wonders if the VC money really just altered their vision too much into something they couldn't do, and they did it too late as well. They pivoted into something where other people had already started taking the lead, I suppose one might say.
Right. Yeah, I never believed in the business. First, I'll just give my personal opinion here. I never believed in the business model. Now, I like Jonathan Downey. Jonathan Downey is a really good leader. He's a very smart CEO. He did attract a lot of venture capital, but everybody, this was back, in the early days, everybody was looking at these huge forecasts and everybody was assuming that drones were going to take off in commercial ventures in a big way. And I think, Gary, you and I chatted about this briefly. At the same time this was happening, they started in 2011. DJI was on the cusp there, and they started releasing just right after that their autopilot. And people in the hobby world were putting it on their copters. They were getting rid of their open source stuff, and they were going with DJI, and they're finding out, hey, this thing loiters pretty well. And this is without GPS, right?
Yeah.
So it loiters pretty good. And I remember Jonathan speaking at the SUSB Expo in San Francisco, the very first one. He gave his presentation. They talked about their hardware. He talked about how it could be flexible and go with fixed wing or multi-rotor, and he was selling hardware. He was selling a platform, and my head cocked to the side, and I went, I'm not sure that's a business model that's sustainable, given that the Chinese are right at your heels, and they've got a lower cost labor force and access to a lot of engineers. For a lot lower price. So, I kind of cut my head, and they kept with that strategy for a long time, and they tried to prototype it into other people's drones. There's USA drones, and they had 4 or 5 companies that they were prototyping in. And it was interesting to see that, nothing really became of it. They used their hardware and their software, which was an autopilot. And then, it realized, then DJI, of course, moved way into the pattern and into the center of the radar, and, pushed everybody out, right? They just began to push everybody out because the market started, and this is what I always said, every piece of research we've done, it starts with aerial photography and video. That's where the market was. That's the center of gravity for the market. And so, DJI clearly came in with a turnkey unit, and then, everybody knows what happened.
Rest is history. Yeah,
continued to produce. Then they pivoted to software too late, right? They figured out, well, there's a data play here, and the pivot there was too late. Now, when they did buy Redbird, Redbird was a kick-ass piece of software. I was very, very, very impressed with Redbird and what they were doing for mining and aggregates. And even today, I'm wondering what's going to happen with that asset, because it is as good or as better as any of the data services and data analytic online services that are out there.
Yeah, I've wondered that as well, and you wonder if they, again, I don't really know anything about VC money or anything like that, but you wonder if that they broke up the Redbird business too much, or moved that focus too far out of the way as well. But others have arrived, caught up, and overtaken, I think, really. Whilst they were going to shows and having big stands. So, but anyway, that's a bit nasty to me. Hello to everybody in the comments. Airware Flight Core, yes, and Argus FPV. Anyone who wants to buy a Pixhawk Dropcopter. We went with Wukong M back in the day because we couldn't get a demo from Airware. Wukong M. That's very good history lesson there. Very good. Yes, a lot of people won't know what that is. Yeah. Hobby channel is I'm on Go Manjeet, FPV, Battle of Britain Model Squadron. We'll get to that later because that really is the positive news story tonight. We're going to be just moaning on a little bit first. Just have to bear with us, moaning on. And Richard said earlier in the comments, I did want to get this in, that I don't believe that the drone is the major cost in starting a drone business unless you already have an established photography business. So I don't know.
What I see here surrounding the video and the photography, air photography business, is a very sharp drop to the lowest bidder price, and I see real estate companies offering €50 for a survey of a house. So who's going to do it by €50? Only the guy that has bought a Mavic or a Phantom and has no fixed costs and doesn't have no fiscal responsibilities. So he takes the €50 as a tip almost.
So just from my understanding, in the UK, our laws are quite strict in the fact that if you're taking money for doing a job, you need to have a CAA drone license. Is that not the case around the world?
No, it's the thing is, what happens if I go to WH Smith? There's still a WH Smith, get the Phantom, park it on top of your house, and you pay me 20 pounds for the pictures I took. It's the same problem everywhere. It's the same problem everywhere. Is the competition from the guy that I can do 10 pictures of 10 houses, and I pay one extra battery for my drone. And
until things go wrong, it's your public liability insurance. Yeah.
Absolutely, but generally, even in country, even where people have in America and Australia and around, and even here, where people do have the correct tickets from their aviation authority of choice, they are still going to services, web services that find these jobs and drive the price down. So even people with a ticket are seeking out those sort of jobs. So it is being driven down to the lowest common denominator in certain fields. I don't know, Colin, were you going to chip in there or something?
Yeah, I was going to chip in there because this was a specific question we asked in our survey about that, and that's the #1 thing. So beyond regulations, when we ask people what's inhibiting the growth of your business, for the service providers, it was, and for businesses, it's understanding regulations and getting waivers, etc. The #2 answer is illegal operators and low-price competitors. That was their #1 complaint. And people made it a point in a survey. This is deep into our survey now. So they're minutes, they're 5 or 6 minutes into the survey when this question comes up. So, they're probably just interested in getting through the survey, but a lot of people, over 100, made additional comments. In addition to clicking the box that said illegal operators, they were happy to tell us the reason why they were doing, even though that wasn't requirement for the question. So what that tells me, and I see this in the forums, and you see it too on Facebook and et cetera elsewhere, it's the race to the bottom, and we may be at bottom, is something that's frustrated businesses for a few years now, because it was the same thing last year.
But when you say that's largely because, I don't mean to cause offense to some people, but some people don't actually have a plan. They don't have a speciality that they can use. You know, the RPAS is actually, it's just a force multiplier, isn't it? When you have a grown-up job already, it's another tool in the toolbox to help you with the job, rather than just rocking up and it's like the old days of our people just knocking on your door with an aerial photo of your house, isn't it? If that's all you've got in the bag, then you're probably not going to go very far. Or am I being just horrible and too dismissive?
No, there's a lot of people. So that shows up in the survey. A lot of the service providers this is a secondary income. This is not their primary income. They're not making money from the operations. I'm looking here real quick to see if I can find the actual data that I've got. Is that 78% of people who took the survey, 78% of them earn under $50,000 a year with their drone service business, and only 12% make over $100,000. That's a little up from last year. So we may be considering seeing the beginning of an upward trend, but so compared with last year, a lower percentage make less than $50,000 and a higher percentage make over $50,000. Additionally, we see that there's more full-time employees and fewer part-time employees. But at the end of the day, it's still 78% make less than $50,000 a year. That's not a full-time business. That's a part-time business. And people tell us it's their part-time business. And anecdotally, I can tell you, when I was at the last conference I was at, I led a panel. The panel was on how to grow your drone service business. And the room was, and this was a 7 o'clock at night session from 7 to 8:30. So people were intent to come after being the show all day. The room had probably 100 to 120 people in it, and people asking all kinds of questions. But 50% of the people that were in that room were brand new to drones, and they were kicking the tires. They bought their drone, they hung out their shingle, and they wanted to know, how do I grow my business next? You ask them, one of the first this is the question I always ask a crowd now is, how many of you know what the term photogrammetry means? And if you don't know the answer to that question, you know who you're dealing with.
Colin, you should have, what does orthophotogrammetry means? That will make it even harder.
Well, I must say, we have FPV royalty massing in the comments. I'm impressed. G'day, Robo Biggles, and everybody else there that's from this here ragtag and bobtail group, which we'll get to later. Which we'll get to that later. We'll jump. Stay with us, please, Colin, and chip in, and we'll probably have more to say about your findings, but we'll jump to Bruce. And Bruce, you ranted on about more data, more numbers out of New Zealand this time. Just give us a 30-second takeaway from what's happening in New Zealand, or maybe make it 3 minutes.
Yeah, well, I'll rant on forever. But yeah, basically we have some government organizations releasing some figures, and they basically prove that drone operations are the safest form of aviation ever. We had a press release by the Airways Corporation, which is the business that runs the airspace. They're responsible for air traffic control. They make hundreds of millions of dollars a year out of basically providing services to people who use the airspace. Now, the chief executive of that organization came out and said that we want to continue, allow flyers or airspace users to continue to use the air safely. And for that reason, we want to register drones and make mandatory training for drone pilots, which was kind of strange, because he's saying that, well, if you're going to continue to use the airspace safely, you must already be using it safely. So he's acknowledging that the airspace is safe in the era of drones. It's not a problem. Then we have the Ministry of Transport. Now, that's the government department that oversees all the sort of transport activities within the country. They came out and said there are 281,000 drone operators in New Zealand. plus 200,000 casual drone operators in the form of tourists. So that's nearly 500,000 people using drones in New Zealand every year. If you compare that, they then said there are 5,000 registered aircraft in New Zealand. So it's like a nearly 100-to-1 relationship between the two. Yet we don't have 100 times more complaints about drones than we do about manned aviation. In fact, we have far fewer complaints about drones than manned aviation. So if you scale it on a per capita basis, drone operations are massively more safe than manned aviation operations. So why are we looking at regulating drones? Why are we looking at making registration mandatory? Why are we looking at compulsory training for drone operators when they are the smallest problem in the aviation sector?
Can I interrupt, Bruce?
Yeah, go, Louis.
You have all those operators, but according to Colin's numbers, most of them are not even flying. So it doesn't matter if we have 100, 200, 500,000 users that fly 3 minutes each one. And perhaps the 5,000 fly 50,000 hours.
Yeah, but I think if you look at the average GA pilot, remember, most of these are GA pilots, recreational pilots. Most pilots, in fact, the figures released by the government departments were kind of stupid. They compared apples with oranges. They said 281,000 drone operators and 5,000 registered aircraft. They didn't actually say instead 27,000 licensed pilots, which is what we should have known. So it's actually about a 10-to-1 ratio of manned aviation to unmanned aviation. But there are far more airprox reports involving aircraft versus aircraft than aircraft versus drone. And most of the recreational pilots, they barely fly enough to keep their hours up to qualify to keep their licenses. The recreational aviation sector has declined massively. So there's a lot of pilots I know out there who are barely putting in a couple, 2 or 3 hours a year because they can't afford to anymore. So it's the same as the drone situation. You have a small percentage does most of the flying, and a large percentage does very little flying, but the ratio is still 10-to-1. So why aren't we seeing 10 times as many drone incidents as manned aviation incidents? The fact that we're not proves that the drone operators are a much safer group of people and that the risk from drones is far lower. So surely the regulators should be focused on improving the safety record and performance of the manned community and saying, well, drones are doing very well nicely. I mean, we have had these drones in the airspace for quite a few years now, not one serious injury, not one death. Compare that to the manned aviation community. Whoa, the big problem are people in airplanes.
Can I keep being devil's advocate, Bruce?
Oh, go, Louis.
And from drone incidents, crashes, and all that, how many have to be reported to the authorities? On the other hand, regular aviation everything has to be reported to the authorities. So it's not also a problem of reporting. So the reporting might be skewed.
But it doesn't really matter. What we're looking at is the risk factor. No one cares if a drone crashes in an empty field miles from nowhere. There's no risk to that. The risk is when people are injured, when property is damaged, or when people die. And those are the figures we should be concerned about. And in that respect, manned aviation woefully is overrepresented when compared to drone or unmanned aviation. There are no significant injuries and there are no deaths.
Let's do some. You have the numbers. So take how many aviation incidents involved injured people, and how many incidents on drones involved injured people. We know it's 0 on drones, but on manned aviation. I'm just playing devil's advocate, okay?
Yeah. I don't have those figures, but we're looking at scores of people injured every year in this country due to aviation incidents, and I'm not quite sure of the deaths, but there's probably 4 or 5, maybe more people killed every year through manned aviation in this country. None of those manned aviation incidents have involved drones, except allegedly one reporter who's later disproved. So, but what we're getting at here is that the government departments have released these figures, which basically prove that the drone issue is a tiny one. We've got Airways, the company that wants to cash in, because they're going to, if we have compulsory drone registration and compulsory training, they're going to be there collecting the money. They are demanding that we register these drones, even though they've just said they are safe. And it betrays the agendas going on behind the scenes here. So I have said, and also the Airways people have said that there's been a enthusiastic response to the voluntary registration system we have, because here in New Zealand we have a website called Airshare, and you can go along and voluntarily register as a drone operator. And they've said New Zealanders have flocked to this website, they'll enthusiastically embrace this. And when you do the numbers, when you crunch the numbers, 3.5% of drone operators in New Zealand have signed up to this voluntary registration, which is hardly enthusiastic. And then CAA here did a survey of all drone operators or anyone that wanted to contribute, and they got one set of information. The Airways Corporation, the people who are looking to cash in on drones, they didn't like that survey. So with Airshare, they commissioned a survey of the people who had already voluntarily registered to find out whether they thought people should register. And of course, the people who had already voluntarily registered said, oh yes, we should have mandatory registration. So, but that's that 3.5%. And of course they're going to say yes, because they've done it themselves. It's it's a self-selecting group, which is not representative of the full community. But Airways are going out there and spinning this hyperbole and telling people all this rubbish in the hope that the government will listen and demand that everyone's registered. And that's just not good enough.
You know, Excel is the most powerful decision tool, and you can torture Excel to give you the answers you want. You just have to fill the numbers, and then you twist it as much as you want to give you the right answers you want. So you can pick up their numbers. You can pick up their numbers and do the opposite conclusions.
Well, that's what I've done. But I've taken their numbers and shown them that they've shot themselves in the foot with all their claims, because they're not substantiated by the very figures and statements they're making themselves.
Yeah.
Well, and it speaks a little bit to our company going bust, in that a lot of the reason for this pressure on regulators is UTM. It's a pressure from UTM companies, which are currently running around trying to make a profit. And no one's buying into it yet, and it's all part of this monetization of the first 400 feet. And I think Colin's stats need to go off to the regulator as well, really, because it's very interesting. People are making money; they have got their businesses, but they're nowhere near the size that we think yet. So the threat just isn't there. It really, absolutely, I really believe it isn't there. I believe. I'm ranting, aren't I? I'll shut up now. Anyone? No. All right. Let's go on. Let's have Chris. Chris, stop me ranting, Chris. Now, size isn't everything, but it is to you, Chris, isn't it? Tell me, not only in the beard department, but your FPV vehicles are bigger than even the Battle of Britain Model Squadron guys' gear. Tell us what have you been doing? You've been on your holidays first to Spain, I think, haven't you?
Working holiday, yes, Gary. It's been a lot of fun. So I guess I'll start with that, and we can branch out from there. So in end of July, we hosted a FAI, World Air Sport Federation, Drone World Cup in Barcelona. There at Les Comes, which is one of the festival sites for the biggest 4x4 festival in Europe. I think it's also the official testing grounds for Land Rover. We held a big race there, and when I mean big, it was. If you haven't seen it, have a look. It was a big race. It was a 1.6 kilometer course using all the parts that commonly end up at the MotoGP events. So we had big 5x5 meter gates, and yeah, we had 70 odd pilots come along. And during the final day of racing, we measured the tickets through the door. We had over 600 live spectators and over 10,000 live views in that 24-hour period. So it was it met our objectives, which is really a fan-first strategy, making sure that the people who want to engage with the sport have something they can really sink their teeth into and feel like that they're a part of it, like they're there. And I feel we did achieve that objective.
And the FAI are fully behind this and enjoying it.
Yes. I don't know if you've seen, but we have a 3-year partnership agreement in place with the FAI, where we're working towards professionalising the sport and engaging in our fan-first strategy across the globe. Part of that is heavily involved in our giant drones as well, but we're doing what we can to assist to improve the F3U or the regular mini-size quads, which are generally below 25 centimeters.
I'm just answering comment here. The spam box the link should be okay to go in there. Drop copter, you should be all right. And if it flags anything up, it shows me normally, so you should be able to drop a link in there. So now, what classes of racers have you got there now? What's your smallest big class, as it were?
Okay, our smallest drone at the moment is a 50 centimeter from corner to corner, motor to motor. That's sporting about 10-inch propellers it's got between 5 and 6 kilowatts of peak power there, so it's quite a useful machine. But it's called the FS 500. It's worth looking up. It's specially designed primarily with the fan-first strategy in mind, but also a number of aerodynamics to ensure that it is a good racing aircraft. The side of it has a really large profile, quite high, so that it's a billboard for advertising that doubles as being really good for spectators to be able to see it from quite a distance, which is really meeting the core objective of what I've been working towards for the past 3 or 4 years now, is making something that works.
That's pretty honest. Good on you for saying that, because a couple of people tried to convince me it was an aerodynamic device and it was this and it was that, and I wondered. I thought, oh, he's got the batteries down there. So it is a billboard, and it makes it easier to see, because let's face it, small racing quads is like watching paint dry. It's great if you're doing the flying, but if you're watching it, it's not so great.
For me, the most annoying thing on these drones, no matter the size, is that it is a 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes race, the most.
Did you watch the DHL League, Louis? They do battery changes, so they fly. There's pit stops. That problem. It adds an extra skill factor as well.
Let's go to another motorized sport like MotoGP, F1, Indy. Those events run for more time, and that's more exposure time for the sponsors. So isn't the duration of these races an obstacle to the sponsorship viewing time?
I don't see it as such. The reason I say that is I've read a number of studies that let's look at our target market as an example, the millennial generation. They're all about those short, sharp events. So if we can pack a bunch of 5-minute races, say 6 5-minute races, totally half an hour, with about 20 seconds between each race, if it can be bam, 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 that does engage that excitement, and that does get people going, yeah, okay, I sort of understand what's going on here. Because as I'm sure you're aware, at this stage, it can be a little bit difficult to get these 2-hour-long racing events happening, and it can be a little bit long and monotonous, to be honest, especially in the format that drone racing currently is, in these relatively shorter courses. Even if you are doing 100, 200, 300 laps, I think that could be a bit monotonous. So that's why I am a strong believer in these very short, sharp races where you can get the most excitement out of it. And that the final lap, that's always the most exciting part. So if we can have 10 of those final laps, which are nail-biting, I think that really will bring in the spectators, and as a natural occurrence, along will come the sponsors and partnerships as well from there. Does that answer your question?
No, I still don't. Sorry, I still don't, because I've been a spectator, and I also have racing drones, and yeah, it's a thrill. But using your point of view, so F1 wouldn't have any spectators, or MotoGP wouldn't have any spectators, because it's half an hour racing and involves strategy. I know there's strategy involved on FPV racing, but it happens so fast that it's so hard to understand what is going on. I believe that's the biggest hurdle on FPV racing. It's understanding what's going on, because it happens so fast. It finishes before you start to understand what is going on.
And that's a real challenge there, if I may just very quickly address that, is making sure the races are easy to understand. So anybody with very minimal experience in drone racing, or even none, can easily pick it up and have a firm understanding of what's going on. That comes back to the core design of the race course and the way that it is presented to the public. These are all things that is not necessarily drone racing itself, but the overarching structure of the event that we're working on making much more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
There's some good comments coming through there about fixed wing FPV racing. And the thing that I'm going to talk about too later on about the Battle of Britain, we could have a Reno Air Race Championship with fixed wing FPV.
Tried to organise that. Tried to set that up before. Yeah, that's Yes, but that's another topic. But yes, that is kind of what you guys were doing, wasn't it? But let's just jump back to Chris a minute. All right, so that's that 500 size. I think it's 500. Call it. I've forgotten already.
Yes, FS 500.
What about the big job? Go on, tell us about the big job.
Okay. So going from the FS 500, the smaller of our giant aircraft, we're now going to talk about the FS 1, which is our real giant. That's a 1.3 meter aircraft, coming in at a bit over 20 kilograms in weight, with a peak power of about 60 kilowatts. So as you can imagine, it's quite a powerful machine. Now, many of you might have seen some of our previous test flight videos from the last couple of years. But those were testing the powertrain and making sure the aircraft and technology worked. We've since gone back to the drawing board and made sure everything can well exceed where we were before. So we feel we've come out with a very, very exciting new type of aircraft here. And we're very, very, very proud to be announcing that in February at Avalon, the Australian International Air Show, in front of what is anticipated to be 250,000 people, we will be taking over the primary runway of the event and doing some high-speed flybys with the FS1. So that will be a very, very exciting time to be able to have that many people in front of us for our initial launch event, and be able to really show them so they can hear and even feel the noise of this thing just flying past them at these high speeds. It's going to be very exciting.
Well, that's where
when you get these bigger craft, what about the safety issues? I know with the mini quad racing, there's nets up and things to stop the drones from getting into the passenger or the viewer area. But what about this big stuff? And the other thing I noticed is I was looking at X-Class quad racing. The bigger quads appear to fly much slower because they're larger. And does that take away from the excitement?
Well, if we're talking about other types of large drone racing, it can do. But we very firmly have an opinion of how the aircraft should be built, and that's to scale. You shouldn't just drag out the arms. It is really about having a purpose to every part of the design. So by getting up to 1.3 meters, each of our 4 motors is a 150cc equivalent. We're not talking anything particularly small here. This is an actual racing quad that is scaled up in its propellers, its motors, its electronics, absolutely everything. In terms of the safety, yes, we are working very closely with the organisers of the event, along with everything that we have in place, making sure we do follow that civil aviation safety approach to the way we go about it, just to make sure that we do lead the way when it comes to safety, which has been one of the big drivers for our work with the FAI as well. We really believe that safety is of primary importance if the sport is to move forward.
What sort of speed are you expecting to be doing?
That's a bit under the wraps at the moment. I can tell you that we are anticipating over the 200 mark, but apart from that, we're going to be keeping those numbers close to our chest until we've got radar gun speed reading, just to make sure everybody understands. We've learnt a lot of lessons over the years about announcements, and we're going to follow the trend there.
As long as the tip of the propellers does not reach supersonic speed, the sky is the limit, right?
It is.
Yes,
and
that's correct.
FX Node, I think FX Node, it is. Well, the RG Pilot developers are very much part of that, but I don't know.
Jonathan.
Chris probably doesn't want to talk about that. But anyway, when you first announced a couple of years ago, probably, isn't it now, your first large quad, it was before the guys at Flight Test, and I thought you were either genius or mad, one or t'other. But the guys at Flight Test then built that enormous quad and had a really fantastic crash, a spectacular crash with it at Flight Fest, and I think that's what's going to make it stand out from the smaller traditional racing, if we will. It's just the crashes are going to be bigger. You're going to be able to stand back. You're probably going to be able to fly around a proper racetrack, a full Formula One course, perhaps. And go on,
I'll
mate.
tell you what would be good, and I think this would really make it more exciting and a better spectator sport, is use tricopters with petrol motors, with internal combustion engines, tricopters with internal combustion engines. Make it cheaper because the electrics, when you get to that size, start getting pretty expensive. Probably make it safer because you don't have batteries that can go incendiary. And it would be 3 motors screaming in unison as you career around the course, and then you can get those much longer flight times as well that Louis looking for. So how about an internal combustion class?
Those are all things that we have toyed with, but at the end of the day, we're very strongly committed to making this a green sport. So no petrol, nothing like that. It's all about pushing the
Methanol,
electronics,
hydrogen,
making sure
methanol.
they just don't provide the power that we require, unfortunately. But yeah, I do like to have thought experiments about these sorts of things, and for other applications of our technology, certainly it makes sense. Something like a gas turbine, even powering batteries to run the electric motors, so you've got those longer flight times. But that's not necessarily for what our racing technology is and the direction that it's currently taking.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing these things fly. Well, what's the cost? Did you tell us? And I wasn't listening. What sort of cost? I'm a sponsor. I've suddenly got very, very wealthy. Bruce is chipped in because he's obviously the main man behind the scenes for everything, and he can easily afford this. And how much of a very small amount of change will you need?
Well, at this stage, we haven't talked costs in public. So for this conversation, unfortunately, I'm going to be keeping, again, the cards close to the
chest. There's no one here. This isn't public. This is as furthest from public as you could get.
However, we have, for example, at our race in Barcelona for the 50-centimeter size, we were very lucky to be sponsored by a number of organisations such as Hellion Tools, a European tooling company, and a range of others. So we're really concentrating on bringing the outside industries from outside of the drone sector into it to really start investing in the technologies and the possibilities of what we're doing here. And it's very exciting. And I think that's a necessary part of bringing drone racing as a sport forward, is really bringing in outside sponsors while at the same time bringing in outside spectators to make sure that we have a good fan engagement across the globe. It's a very interesting time to be in the sport, I have to tell you.
And what do all the other leagues think of this?
I don't know. I don't particularly talk to the heads of the other leagues to find out their opinions on these things. I have a feeling that it is a very common thing, that it's well accepted that there needs to be broader spectators, a broader spectator class across the industry. I think looking at some of the leagues such as DRL and so on and so forth, you can see that they've been going under a bit of a metamorphosis, a bit of an evolution in the way they do it, especially across social media.
I saw somebody asking the other day, and I thought it was quite an interesting question, so I'm going to throw it to the floor. How many people do you think are engaged in FPV flying, not racing per se, but FPV flying in the world at the moment? Could you put a number on it?
Yeah, I can see that being well in excess of 100,000 people being engaged in FPV flying. I wouldn't be surprised if that's in the 200 or 300s. Because I do have a feeling that the people who dabble in racing, they might not be professional racers, but they might have been to a race every year or so. I believe that number would be around the 100,000 mark. But there's a lot of differing studies that I have read on it in the last 12 months that do come out with some vastly different numbers.
Anyone else want to have a stab at that number, or should we move along?
Colin should know.
Since I went off my diet, I'm 3 of them.
God. Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, let's move along. Thanks very much indeed. Stay with us, mate. And now we'll move on to Wing Commander Manjeet, who is well, thank you very much for agreeing to have a chat to us. You are the exciting story in amongst a lot of the doom, and some of your cohort are there in the comments as well.
I think there's quite a few out there. Yeah.
Well, that's a good place to start, isn't it? So Channel 4 is a television channel in the UK, for those of you not in the UK, and on Sunday evenings they've been having a program called Battle of Britain Model Squadron. I can't see it because I'm in South Africa, and Channel 4 seem to be very, very good at butting down the rights on their programs, and it's not appearing on YouTube fast enough for me. How many? Well, Manjeet, please, sir, I'll start unpacking it for us.
Yeah, no worries. So basically, someone rang me in the spring and had a conversation with with the chairman for the RAF Model Aircraft Association. And he asked me if I'd like to be part of this, at which point I said, what are you trying to do? So we've recreated the Battle of Britain with radio control planes, is in a nutshell what it is. But it was quite a daunting task. It's like, I think I'm not the most experienced pilot, but I don't know how many other people have flown with 30 other pilots in the air at any one time, the majority of which were flying line of sight, but we also had FPV pilots as well. But it was just the notion of how on earth are we going to do this and do it. So we do it with dignity and respect to what happened in Battle of Britain as well, and the people who lost their lives. So that's the germ of the idea came there. And then in the summer, we got together at Chickerell Barracks down in Weymouth in the UK, down on the south coast, which was an absolutely perfect opportunity. We wanted to try and get an old RAF base, but actually we were flying right on the coast. So that's where it was taking place as well. So it was a fantastic opportunity to be down there. The pilots that were involved, yes, I'm in the Royal Air Force. I'm an engineering officer in the Royal Air Force, but that was only made up a very small portion of the pilots. The majority were all UK pilots from all different backgrounds, flying all different things. But we also had a couple of guys from Poland, but also a fairly big contingent as well from Germany. And I'll mention Jürgen as well. Jürgen was there. He was the sort of the leader of the German Luftwaffe, ex Luftwaffe himself. So he was a retired lieutenant colonel. But with his band of merry men as well, it was just a fantastic opportunity to try and do something. Obviously, it's RAF 100 here as well. And we've got this thing, commemorate, celebrate and inspire. And, Channel 4 came to us and said, would you like to partake in this? And it was just like an absolutely fantastic opportunity. We did FPV. We did line of sight as well. But it was really difficult. And when you see it, and you will see it eventually, I'm sure. And I've tried to put a link up, but unfortunately it won't let me post the link up. And I'll try and do it later on, because there is a little bit of a trailer for the actual program. You'll see that there's little smoke canisters on the aircraft as well. So we had a system on there where we had, it was an infrared system with receivers and transmitters on the front, with quite a sort of a narrow targeting area, but we did actually have to shoot down the opposition. So there was no trigger on the button or anything like that, other than for the transmitters at the front, and you did actually have to shoot the other people down.
And this has arrived at a time when model aviation around the world is kind of under threat, really, if you will, from regulators. Has it stirred interest in the UK? Are you aware? So
much. So I was lucky enough to also go on BBC Breakfast, so it doesn't get a wider audience than that. But actually, just the strange thing was walking back. I actually had to catch the train back. Carrying my aircraft as well, so it was a little Dynam Hurricane, sort of just over a meter wingspan. But the amount of attention it had, and it was interesting. Quite a few of the older generation were coming up just because they were interested in the Spitfire. But actually, the younger generation, sort of the PlayStation generation, fascinated about what on earth am I doing carrying this around, and couldn't believe it when I told them that it actually flew. And it was like I grew up with radio control planes, much like everybody else did, with my craft design and technology teacher, Mr. Glover. I'll put him out there, from Queen Eleanor School. But it was down to him and the after-school CDT classes that we had that gave me that sort of the idea of aviation, and then led me into my future career as an engineering officer in the Air Force. But I don't think that happens anymore. I'm a STEM ambassador as well, but the things that we were doing in our after-school STEM classes were way and above what the guys are doing in schools now. However, I will say STEM is around the world as well.
What does that mean? Just unpack that for people that don't know what that means.
So this is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and this is it's definitely a UK government scheme, but I know it's big in America as well. But we know there's a national shortage for engineers, scientists, and the like, and mathematicians and the like. So how on earth are we going to resolve this skills gap that we've got? So in the Air Force, all my engineering officers, when they come out of their phase 2 training, they're also STEM ambassadors, and they will go into schools as well. talking to kids 11, 12, 13 years old, and they will do after school lessons with them, talking about anything you like, anything to do with technology, whatever's their sort of key area of expertise. So I ended up helping out a school make a drone, a simple drone from first principles. So talking about propellers one week, talking about motors and things like that, and building it together, but just sowing that seed of technology and engineering into the next generation.
I suppose I've got to say, it's just occurred to me, you're in the Air Force, flying grown-up aeroplane things and all that sort of thing. You're supposed to hate us. You're not supposed to be flying model airplanes and be involved in all this.
I do listen to Bruce's rants, you know, and it's really difficult because I also fly microlights as well. So trying to get my license at the moment. I went solo about 5-6 weeks ago. But I've always been in aviation. My last command job was leading the engineering team on 99 Squadron C-17s. But it's a really tricky area because everybody on the screen here isn't going to break the rules. And the problem is it's only going to get worse because the technology is so easy to get hold of. But what on earth do we do? Because I think we'd all happily go and register because we're not going to break the rules to the extent that the aviation authorities are looking at. And it's what on earth do we do? Because we'll go and register. The people who are actually going to get into trouble and do the things that the aviation authorities are worried about, they don't care. They're going to do it anyway. And the thing is, the technology. I mean, I taught the kids basic principles of soldering and everything, just like, you know, from Bruce's videos and things. But the thing is,
well, never mind, eh? Hopefully they'll find a good one.
I've learned to do it properly now. Don't worry.
Yeah, good, good, yeah.
But the people, you can just, like you say, go down to Maplin or whichever store's still alive, and you can just go and buy something so easily. So what we try and do when we're talking, especially in any conversations that we've had with the public, is join a model club. You know, learn the basics. You know, insurance is obviously there, but learn the basics and learn the basic principles of aviation first. And then you'll realize, actually, it is stupid going above the clouds. You know, it is stupid flying in that airspace. But if you don't know about the airspace, learn about it. And it's education at the end of the day. But the people who are going to break the law are not going to go and seek that education either.
No, you're right. And I failed to warn you that common sense is banned in this.
Yeah.
We have no conversations that start with looks like Captain Common Sense is going to join in. Go ahead, Bruce. Over.
No, actually, I'm just writing a story for the Daily Mail. I just want some more information. So you put guns on drones, then, eh?
No, we didn't. So I mean, it was so much fun, and when you see the episodes. It was a great opportunity because, you know, we haven't had fixed wing aviation, you know, radio controlled aviation in the spotlight for God knows how many years. If you don't go out there and buy those magazines like RCM&E and things like that, I definitely grew up buying and reading, the hobby was pretty much dead. The drones came along, fantastic, and it's really reinvigorated it. But I'm on the same thing, you know, watching small drones flying around a building or something like that doesn't really do it for me. That's why something big with the Reno Air Racer type thing, you know, Red Bull does it, you know, with that sort of thing. It's something that will capture the imagination. But half the people, they love building them. And it's that bit about your hand skills that you have, and you're actually building something to make it. You might not be the best pilot, much like myself, but I take so much passion in making something out of nothing, even if it's just going to a school and getting a bit of foam board. And I think one of my lessons is I tell them to draw an aeroplane on the board, whatever it looks like, a Snoopy mobile, you know, there's always a Concorde type thing. And then I say, right, now cut it out of foam and we'll make it fly. And doing that sort of thing. And that's a really big part of the hobby and future technology and engineering. You know,
but hang on, you're a grown up in the Royal Air Force. Do you really think it's important to make sure youngsters have these skills? Is it really that important, or are you
you already know the answer to that? You already know the answer to that. The reality is, we have a skills shortage. We're all in my STEM class. I can't say that every single one of them was going to be that engineer, but there was at least 2 of them. You could spot them a mile off, you know. And they had the hand skills, and we need people. Applications are fine on your iPhone and things like that, but who's going to make the next generation of avionics equipment, which isn't going to be like this, but it's going to be solid state and things. But we need those people to make that stuff. So yeah, it's definitely important. We still need to keep those keep everything working: cars, washing machines, aircraft. So
but isn't it easy to be a fashion blogger on YouTube?
Well, I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Bruce would know. Bruce would definitely know. I mean, that's definitely his thing.
Well, he's always winning, isn't it? It must be really hard.
Well, it must be. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it is an element of aspirations. And hands up, yes, I also teach STEM, but we put an A in it and make it STEAM to bring in the arts as well. And yes, you do see some youngsters that just get it and. Well, no pun intended, but they fly. We have those the Lego robots is a thing that's very popular, and some of them just get it, and it amazes me when they sit down and concentrate and make the thing and make the thing work and code the thing.
What made me that we actually are going in the right direction. So there's a big place, the NEC in Birmingham here. It's a very big venue, and there was a national event called the Big Bang Fair, and it was a huge STEM fair from schools all over the country. And what was really impressive was the level of the projects that were winning the awards at this STEM event. And there were thousands of children there from all different levels of schools and things like that. But I think the winning chap wanted to make a 3D printer using old printer technology for under £100, so everybody could make a 3D. And I was thinking, I felt like a dullard, going, "Oh my God, how is this guy making that sort of stuff?" And the other award winners were absolutely amazing on the level they were doing PhD type stuff at school level. And that gave me real hope that actually, at least the UK has got some absolutely fantastic engineers and scientists coming through the system.
I don't know if that's good thing for the kids or a bad thing for the PhDs.
Well, what are they going to do at PhD level? That's the thing. And that's where you'll get your hydrogen planes or the thing that we haven't even thought about yet.
And that's bang on, but that is my big worry about this push on regulations for people under 18 and stuff like that. Grounding them is just come on, because we haven't thought of the thing that some young girl or boy will think of soon. It's not even in our imagination, and we can't cut them off at the knees with ill-founded regulation.
It's good to have such projects that promote science and technology and engineering, because I'm a mechanical engineer by training, and I think it's important to have kids that can pick up a hammer or a screwdriver and know what it is, and go to a lathe and know how to operate a lathe if need to. So there are some basic skills that have been lost in the last couple of years with all these go digital. Some basic skills of engineering are lost.
And that's the one thing in the program that we could have done better, and it's only because it was term time, and the production was pretty a fast pace. It would be, if we could have had some kids down one day in the workshops and things just to have a look what was going around, but it was just impossible to do with the school terms and things like that. But that would have been a good thing to do. Yeah.
Can I ask you, how do these STEM programs are being funded?
So they're national programs, so they're funded by the government. So I'm pretty sure it's called STEM Learning at the moment in the UK, but they're government-led programs. So also in the UK. We've actually had something called a Year of Engineering, and that is definitely a government-funded program where they've had funding to push even more the STEM, the STEM initiative. And now they're thinking, what are we going to do next year to carry on? Year after Year of Engineering to carry it on.
No, just rinse and repeat and pick up the guys that are at the same age that the guys of last year. So it's a program that can easily be repeated for next year.
Yeah. I know the guys at Flight Test, they talk a lot about STEM as well. and they
Yes,
have STEM kits and things. So
they do, and I know that old duffers like me will know that the Donald Campbell's boat Bluebird, has recently been restored in the UK, and on the Scottish island where they ended up running it, they ran a load of STEM in conjunction with that, and apparently there's a noticeable uptick in science learning that's happened on that island because that project was there and they involved the local community. And the same with, is it called Thrust S? It's not called Thrust SSC now, is it? The new fast car from Richard Noble.
It's Bloodhound. It's
Bloodhound. That's what it is. Bloodhound.
So
that's done the same.
Yeah. So there was the Learning Partnership. They did a program, and this is through Alden Dunipace's really good work. And I think they went into, I should know the exact figure because I helped fund some of it, but we made foam rocket cars, and that was fantastic. So I'm pretty sure we had 400 schools participating in it, with a big final at one of the RAF bases. But that was absolutely fantastic, where they could carve certain shapes in their cars with rocket motors on the back. And to see the kids' faces when these rockets go off, and with bringing cyber into it as well with BBC Microbits. I don't know if you've heard of those, but fantastic little bits of kit. So you can bring the cyber element into it, the IT element into it, and the aerodynamic element into it, and all sorts of things. Yeah, that was a fantastic one. But that was through the Learning Partnership. But another big STEM event.
Is there much of a makerspace movement in the UK? Because that's sort of the logical follow-on for a lot of this, isn't it? To move into makerspace, so that once they get the enthusiasm, there's places they can go to continue with the let's build stuff thing.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that, Bruce. No.
I think makerspace it's not a thing here. I don't think it's really a thing in the UK. It's the US, I think, really, where it's a thing. I think in England it's called the Shed. And in a lot of other countries, I think the makerspace has always been there. Young Jamie Bignell that we've had on here, he makes the most amazing, and I first met him making the most amazing bottle rockets, multi-stage with electronics to fire off a parachute and all that sort of thing. And now he's studying all sorts of crazy space-based stuff.
But the thing is, we don't have those programs, and I don't know, the older generation here might remember the Great Egg Race. That's really showing my age.
Yes, I was in that.
but you see things like Scrap Heat Challenge, but it's not. It doesn't seem to be the younger generation that watch Scrap Heat Challenge. It's normally the slightly older people. But what's there for things like the Great Egg Race, or things that are STEM type races? I suppose you've got Robot Wars, but there's always adults doing all that sort of stuff. So
yes, it's always the son or daughter stood next to them while Dad's got a controller and the child's like,
health and safety can't have children playing with sharp things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I moved this off topic a little bit. We should get back to the Battle of Britain Squadron a little bit more. Has anyone up on the floor got any more?
Who won?
Got any questions?
Basically,
who won?
Who won?
The battle won. The battle won. That's all I'll say. You have to watch the final episode. But there's been some people who are a bit anti over it because we used foamies. But it's just logistics. There's no way we could have used balsa planes.
Oh my God!
We were having mid-air collisions. It was just impossible. So it's a little bit of, I think, reality needs to go into it. And yeah, same with if we used IC stuff. I think it would have been much harder to launch. The number of aircraft we had to launch in one go would have been very tricky.
Yeah, don't spoil it by telling us who won. We'll wait for and see that for ourselves.
We all know who won.
But what was the maximum number, or if you're allowed to say whatever you're allowed to say? What was the maximum number of aircraft you had?
So total in the air at one time, it was around the sort of mid-30 mark. So and the FPV stuff, the footage from that is absolutely fantastic. The FPV guys did a great job. And to be honest with you, hats off to the guys in the workshops who kept everything going. The number of batteries that we had to charge and things like that, and fixing constant glitches with the aircraft.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Was it like a 10-minute slot and then and do it all again, or?
So no, because even with the number of batteries we had, we had to again wait for the weather as well. So I remember just before the final battle, the sea fog just rolled in, and it's like, oh my, this is just like the real thing. You know, having to beat we've got obviously paying for all the camera time and whatever, but the sea fog's just rolled in. What are we going to do now? But and then everybody is on tenterhook because everybody is, their hands, you know, most of the people, their hands are shaking when they're flying with over 30 aircraft in the air, just to try and make sure they're keeping an eye on their own aircraft, but then actually fighting as well. It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible.
Did you guys get paid, or was it all volunteer stuff?
It was all volunteer.
Yeah, so no operating authority required. Yeah.
No sponsorship from German or UK companies involved, right?
No, but I mean, from the Air Force side, we all had to be RAF Model Aircraft Association members, which meant that we were already British Model Aircraft Association members as well. So you know, it was all covered with the insurance and things. So.
I have noticed that there's social media comments, and I do find it interesting that people have ripped into it as much as they have, and not taken the more positive spin. There has been a lot of positive stuff, but I think there is a danger if we continue down this route of saying model aircraft are only made of balsa wood with glow engines. Mind, you see them in New Zealand, they seem to revert into it. But anyway, if we go down this route,
I started off with balsa. What got
we all did.
Yeah, but what got me back into the hobby was being able to buy a cheap foamy to learn to fly again. Obviously electric has totally LiPo batteries and brushless motors has totally transformed the hobby, and I guess it's like digital SLRs and digital cameras and digital and SLRs, and no one would have had couldn't possibly have a digital camera, and the same transitions happening now. So.
I think in the current time, it's a bit of a ridiculous battle to be having, no pun intended with battles there, but to worry about that at a time when lots of other bigger picture threats are facing the hobby, it's really not worth worrying about whether it's balsa or foam. It's whether you're going to fly anything at all. I am quite worried. Sorry, say again. Paper planes. Yes, I was flying them today with my class. In no way was I just enjoying the sun while they chucked paper airplanes off a treehouse. No way at all was that happening. No way at all. There must have been some learning outcomes happening. Anyway, look, what's the time? We've gone 7 minutes past the hour. So this is the time when I traditionally have to say, has anyone else seen anything else that's caught their eye this week?
Totally unrelated to stuff, but there was the Reno air races. Did you see the two jet aircraft that collided and the resulting damage to one of them? And he got it down safely. That was really impressive, actually. The two aircraft collided. One lost the tip of his wing and an aileron, and he still brought it in perfect landing. It was really brilliant. Crazy.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of a bang in the tail as well, wasn't there? It was quite And when you watch all the bits of debris coming down, it did look a bit game over, didn't it? It was, yes, I did see that. And in the comments, everyone's been talking about Reno racing. Well, there we are then. Let's. Well, when shall we start? First round at Tokoroa. I'm sure the local council
turbine quadcopter class. We can see that happening.
Yeah, I'm sure that well, we could combine it with the large scale multi-copter racing.
Get one of these.
Get one of those. Oh, I was going to mention that big helicopter. Did anyone see that big French helicopter that got put out this week? That was a great looking thing. And I was also going to mention, I forgot to mention hydrogen, which you mentioned in passing there, Bruce. Just remind me why hydrogen planes are a bad idea again.
The energy density of compressed hydrogen is pretty poor, and it's like, where do you refuel? There are a lot of issues against hydrogen. Also, it's incredibly dirty. 93% of the world's hydrogen is made by cracking methane, and for every kilo of hydrogen you produce, that creates 4 kilos of CO2. So it's far from green.
Come on, Bruce, you have lots of methane production over there at New Zealand.
True, yeah, cow-powered or sheep-powered drones, that'd be great.
And all that. No, it's nice to see some alternative people starting to mess around with alternative power sources.
But aren't they
Well, what was more interesting was that solar-powered drone that they reckon it was totally solar-powered. Did you see that one? It's covered in solar panels, quadcopter, flies by power of the sun. Who'd have thought? Just like a rubbish bag.
Well, yeah. What are you trying to say there, Brucey? It's yes, that one keeps popping up. That one, no pun intended there either. But that one keeps arriving in the news feeds. You watch, I'll be back in 2 years' time. It keeps coming back around, that one. But the hydrogen gig seems to have kicked off in a big way in the last couple of weeks. It's getting mentioned all over the place, and I think it's like another one of those. People are saying 2 hours, and with the Believer style aircraft and the larger MyFly Dream, Twin Dreams, whatever they're called, and stuff like that, you're getting reliable 4 to 5 hour flight times with a decent sized camera. So you're only 1 hour away from the magic 6 hours of useful daylight for photogrammetry. So we're kind of solved next year. I'm pretty sure we're going to be seeing lots of cheap off-the-shelf 6 hour platforms.
Colin,
the hydrogen drone. Well, the hydrogen drone was only under $7,000. It was pretty cheap, actually, under $7,000. Which brings up the whole question that we were talking about before. What's holding back the growth of the drone industry? And I believe it's probably 80 to 90% regulation, because the technology is just about there. Technology is going at a great rate, but we just can't use it because the people who don't know anything about what they're regulating are saying, oh, it's way too dangerous.
Yeah. And it is, Bruce. And it is, Bruce. We see one of your videos and we get scared all the time.
We just see Bruce and we get scared. That's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. Anyway, this is turning into a rant. Manjeet, thank you very, very much indeed
for
taking
you
time to join us. And no, it's all ours. I look forward to watching that program within the UK, and I'll have some dodgy friends that are prepared to send it to you. I'm sure it'd be worth watching that. Battle of Britain Model Squadron. Louis, thank you. What's on your workbench, Louis?
Oh, I'm down deep in legislation. Please.
Oh, that's no fun. We won't bother. And did that helicopter actually fly behind you, or is it still just a man ornament?
No. This one is the smaller one, the 500 from TT, and it already has a Pixac V5, the new one running Ardupilot 3.6 RC10.
Well, I see. Of course, it's all numbers to me. I'm not Greek. And Colin, the report's out this week. So is it like having a big show or a carnival float? You finish one and it's straight on to the next one.
That's pretty much how it goes. Yes, and then I hit a couple of drone shows where I get to present some of the research. But yes, we're on to our next bit of research, which will be on the market size for commercial drone activity in the U.S. And we're very narrow focused, and we're going to do a bottoms up. We're halfway through it. A bottoms up research that shows the economic benefit. So you see those big economic numbers, the big 127 billion. This will be a more realistic. Actually done on the use cases that drones actually where they provide an economic benefit.
I see. And Captain Chris, obviously you're back to the high seas on your pirate vessel this week. Oh, that didn't work because he didn't respond. What's up in your week this week, Chris?
Not much. Just lots of preparation because there's some big events coming up this year that we're helping to organise as well. So lots to do. So no doubt, hopefully, I'll be back on the channel. Perfect. Having a bit of a chat in the next couple of weeks about the next big one that we've got coming up in about 2 months.
We definitely want to try and do some sort of live stream when you're flying thumping that big thing down the runway at the Air Day. That would be amazing.
Oh, yeah, that'll be February, but before then we've got a very, very big event that we're helping move along. So hopefully we might even be able to do a live crossover from that. But more details to come.
Beautiful, beautiful, and finally, Mr. Simpson, come on, get that balloon into the air.
I'm working on the Ardu balloon software now, but
it's already there. It's in there.
It's already there, Bruce.
It's already there, mate. It's already there.
Come on, you're behind the times, Bruce. It's already there.
No. Oh, does it have settings for? size of rubbish bag and things like that you can adjust.
No,
to,
it just adjusts by itself.
Has it got return to home? That's what I want. Return to launch. Does that have that?
It has that.
Sweet. Actually, no. After listening today to the various people on the panel, I'm really enthusiastic. I did have a plan to build a nitro-powered tricopter some time ago, and I thought, yeah, I'll get around to it. But I'm actually getting quite enthused now. I would love to hear the sound of 3 nitro motors screaming at about 15,000 RPM as it whizzes past my head at speed. I might do some more thinking about that.
Well, and you could always, if you make it big enough, you can put Ron on it, and he can go past and give you an in-flight commentary. It'd be great with Ron on it.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
And I see in the comments, I am being reminded to remember to check out, if you're in the US, the FPV Freedom and Coalition. Join up to that and help in their fight to keep hold of Section 336. And on that note, I should say thanks very much again, everybody, for joining us. Like, subscribe, do whatever else you're supposed to do. Hit all those things. YouTubers say all these things, don't they? But bells and all this other nonsense. Do all that nonsense. And please join us again at 2100 GMT next Tuesday, when we'll do it all again. If you're flying this weekend, have a safe one. Have a very safe week. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.